If success is in the follow-up, then that means that we always need to be thinking about how we're going to stay top of mind with the people that we want to do voiceover work for. So what does that mean? Well, email is part of that strategy, regularly putting yourself into their inbox. Social media is part of that strategy. Staying front and center with people on social media by sharing new content and by engaging with the content that they are posting. Networking can be part of that strategy, particularly if you're working on a local level and you've got an opportunity to see people face to face. But something else that can be part of that strategy is swag. When you choose the right swag and send it to the right people, it can potentially keep you in front of them every single day. And it really doesn't get much better than that. And so, what I want to talk to you about in this episode are some considerations for choosing the right swag that you might want to incorporate into your voiceover marketing strategy. Now, just about any time a voice actor sees something related to Dr. Pepper, they think of me. When Dr. Pepper became the number 2 beverage brand in the United States, I got tagged a million times on that post. When Dr. Pepper came out with ice cream, I think last year, there was a Dr. Pepper ice cream flavor that came out. I had all kinds of people tag me in that post. Sadly, nobody sent me any Dr. Pepper ice cream. Still trying to get over that. But everybody still thought about me, which was great. Dr. Pepper jelly beans, I've been thought about, I've been tagged, they've sent them to me. Dr. Pepper Peeps, I've been thought about, I've been tagged, they've sent them to me. I will never, ever forget Dustin Ebaugh for sending me this Dr. Pepper hat. Every time I put that hat on now, I think of Dustin Ebaugh. But the point is that I have built an association with Dr. Pepper. So the way I think that it works, the way that I hope that it works, is somebody sees Dr. Pepper, they think of Marc Scott. When somebody thinks of Marc Scott, hopefully they're thinking about VOpreneur. So my brand comes front and center every time there's something Dr. Pepper going on. So this is another consideration when you're choosing swag is what are you associated with, or what can you build an association with? I think the same thing could be said for me and barbecue. Every time people see something barbecue related, they often will think about me because I share that kind of content on social media. I talk about it often. And so I've built this association that creates a brand recognition. Barbecue, Marc Scott. Dr. Pepper, Marc Scott. Red Sox, Marc Scott. Now, I'm not saying this to sound arrogant or egotistical or like some kind of raging narcissist. I'm just saying that over time, because of how I present myself on social media, because of the things that I talk about repeatedly, associations get made. And so when people think about those things, at least to a degree, they think about me. And when they think about me, that's a form of brand recognition, and that becomes a form of marketing. So consider what kind of things can be associated with you, or what kind of things can you build an association with? That is something to think about when you are choosing swag. Too often when we give away swag, we're only thinking about ourselves and our brand, and we're not specifically thinking about the recipient or what they need. And so this is another consideration. Once upon a time, I created some VOpreneur stickers. And those VOpreneur stickers worked pretty well because a lot of voice actors identify themselves as VOpreneurs. And so if you identify yourself as a VOpreneur, you're proud to put that sticker on your laptop or on your backpack or wherever it is, because you represent yourself that way. You think of yourself as a VOpreneur. But on the flip side of that, if I created Marc Scott voiceover stickers and handed those out to a bunch of people, nobody's going to put them on their laptop because nobody has that same kind of association. And so it's important to think about that. What is the association and is it going to work? Stickers may work in one instance, but probably are not going to work in another instance. And so you have to think about how the recipient interacts with your brand and whether or not they would interact with your brand in that way. And when I say that way, I mean based on the type of swag that you're creating. So before you make, design, print, order, ship anything, you need to ask yourself, is this something the buyer will want, need, or use? Is this something the buyer will want, need, or use? Taking the idea of the audience a step further, I think that you can also think about genres and the niches that you're targeting. So, just pulling a random example out of my butt here. Let's say that you target e-learning developers, but you also target video game developers. Both developers, but two very different kinds of developers. So maybe for an e-learning developer, they get some kind of branded notebook or planner, something that has more of that e-learning professional teacher, educational vibe going on. But for the game developer, maybe it's some sort of fun LED light strip that they can use to customize their space. Or maybe you've got a 3D printer and you send out like a 3D printed figure of a character or something like that. So taking your audience into consideration and coming back to what I said earlier, what would they want? What would they need? Or what would they use? So these are all things that I want you to take into consideration. But I also think there are three primary factors for me that I'm going to take into consideration and work through when I am choosing any kind of swag. So here are what I believe those three primary factors are. Factor number one is choose something useful. I have more branded coffee mugs than I know what to do with. And to be honest, some of those branded coffee mugs have been given away, and some of those branded coffee mugs have probably found themselves in the trash. Now, part of that is just because I don't drink coffee. So, there's that. But part of it is also, it's just not something that I need 100 of. I'm not going to use 100 of them ever, unless I happen to be in a situation where I had 100 people over. But if I had 100 people over, I still wasn't going to use them because I don't want to do the dishes later. So thinking about something that is useful, I think, is really important. Pens can be fine. Look, I'm holding one in my hand right now, but how many pens do I actually need? I've got branded pens for days, some of them that have been in a drawer since the day that I got them, and I'm probably never going to look at them ever again. So what is something that is useful that you could give away? If you were at VO Atlanta in 2024, you probably saw me walking around on the weekend with a stress ball in my hand pretty much the whole entire weekend. That was a VA for VO branded stress ball. I carried that thing around in my hand all weekend. It did exactly what it needed to do on two fronts. One, it helped me because sometimes crowds can be overwhelming for me. And so I got my stress ball in my hand the whole entire time. But two, it got the conversation going about VA for VO because people would see the stress ball, ask me about the stress ball, and I would start talking about VA for VO. So it really accomplished two different things. That is something that is incredibly useful and something that is incredibly effective. So think about what are the things that somebody is going to use on a day-to-day basis. What do you use on a day-to-day basis? Those are the sorts of things that will potentially work for your audience. You could think about something like a webcam cover. Everybody's afraid of hackers breaking into their computer, turning their webcam on. And so everybody wants webcam covers now. You could put something like that on. So every time they look up and they're not using their webcam, there's your branded logo right in front of their face. USB thumb drives. I don't know. I'm a woodworker. And one of the theories in woodworking is that no matter how many clamps you have, you will never have enough clamps. I think probably to a degree, the same thing could be said for USB thumb drives. You can never have too many USB thumb drives. You will always find a use for them. So think about things that are useful, because if they are useful, they are being used. And when they are being used, then they are reinforcing your brand, because every time the individual uses that thing, your logo is right in front of them. So that's number one, choose something useful. Number two, something I keep with me. So the question that you would ask yourself here is, where does my audience spend their time? Could you get them something for their desk? A lot of people spend a lot of time at their desk. Could you get them something that they could use in their car? Maybe they're commuting back and forth to work every day. People use the car to go shopping. They use the car to go on trips. They use the car to go out on the weekend. So people spend a lot of time in their cars, or tend to spend a lot of time in their cars. Maybe if it's somebody that lives in the city, maybe they're spending a lot of time on the train because they're using the train to commute every single day. And so what is something that you could give them that they could use every single day during the commute on their train? And that's something that, again, puts your logo in front of them every single day. So a branded phone charger, a travel mug, a desk calendar that sits right there on their desk every single day. So think about things that they will keep with them, or things that will go in a place of prominence. Where do they spend the vast majority of their time? Could you do branded toilet paper? Yes, everybody spends time there every single day. Is that the brand association that you want to make? Probably not. So let's go back to thinking about the office, maybe the car, maybe the train. So that's number 2 on the list, is something that I will keep with me. Number 3 on the list is something that is unique and will stand out. So earlier I mentioned that, I go to conferences, I get stickers, I get coffee mugs, I get pens. I have more coffee mugs and pens than I know what to do with, and so they don't really stand out. However, when the GVAA was handing out fidget spinners at conferences a couple of years ago, that was something that nobody else had ever given me before. I still have that GVAA fidget spinner. I should have pulled it out in time for this episode. It's in a desk drawer right on the other side of where I'm sitting right now. I still use that thing all the time. I play around with that thing all the time. That is something that absolutely stood out. That is something that was absolutely unique. Think about something like, seed paper postcards. So you send somebody a branded postcard in the mail, but it's actually a seed paper. So they can take that, they can plant it, it grows, it turns into vegetables, it turns into a flower, it turns into a plant, whatever. And so even though the paper itself is gone, every time they see that plant, every time they eat another one of their tomatoes, they're thinking about you and they're thinking about your brand because it's something that you gave them. That is something that is unique and that stands out. Now, I don't want to steal an idea from a dear friend who I think has probably cornered the market on this, but just like you would associate Dr. Pepper with me, most of you would associate socks with Uncle Roy. That is a guy who is very passionate about socks. I can tell you, full and complete transparency, until I met Uncle Roy, I had black socks and gray socks. That was it. Black socks, gray socks, nothing else. Now I have crab socks, I have lobster socks, I have barbecue socks, I have orange socks, I have Dr. Pepper socks. I've got all kinds of different socks, and the vast majority of them came from Uncle Roy as gifts. So every single time I put those socks on, I'm thinking about him. Not that I don't think about him every day already, but every time I put those socks on, I absolutely think about Uncle Roy. Could you do something like that? Something that is unique and that will stand out. So again, just to recap these top 3, choose items that are useful, something that's going to be needed or required or used every single day. Something that they're going to keep with them. So put it in a place of prominence in their office, in their car, where they're commuting, on the train, and something that is unique and something that is going to stand out. These are the things that I think that you need to be thinking about when you're choosing swag. But I also want to give you a few other considerations that you're going to want to factor into your decision-making process, because all of these play a role as well. Choosing sustainable swag can be a really smart play because it gives you something else that you can tap into. A lot of people are very eco-conscious today, and so eco-friendly swag can definitely stand out in a good way. So think about that seed paper postcard, for example, something that ultimately biodegrades, turns into a plant. I love it. When you are determining your audience, think about cultural considerations. So maybe, for example, don't send Christmas-themed swag to certain clients who you know or you think, expect, assume might not celebrate the holiday. Kind of like you wouldn't send a branded winter toque to your client in Phoenix. Probably not going to use it. Think about distribution. Postage can get really pricey if you're shipping larger, bulkier items, and so you might want to think about sending things that are a little bit smaller or a little bit easier to ship. On the flip side of that, can you find an option where the item is shipped for you? So maybe you're going to go with the sock thing, just as an example. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to have branded socks, because the gift is the sock itself. And when that gift comes from you, every time they wear those socks, they're going to think about you. So that might be something that you could order online via Amazon or some other online sock retailer and have it delivered to the client for you, which eliminates some of the hassle, but you still get the effect of the association. Think about cost versus value. So expensive isn't always better. If you give away expensive swag that only gets used one time, or maybe even only gets used periodically, it may not have the same value as something that is more affordable and that gets used every single day. So cost versus value is an important consideration. I don't care if it's a little cheaper if it's going to get used. The more that it gets used, the more my brand appears in front of the recipient. Understand your audience. This is another important one. So sending tech-heavy swag to a client demographic who might prefer more analog methods, it doesn't have the same level of effectiveness. Just like sending a pen and a paper notebook to a client who hasn't handwritten so much as their name in a decade might not be the most appropriate gift. So think about age, profession, and interests when you're trying to determine swag. And then think about brand alignment. As much as possible, choose things that make an association with your existing brand. So, for example, if I started sending out barbecue rubs to a lot of my clients, there's a brand alignment there because I'm associated with that barbecue. So it may not specifically be a Marc Scott voiceover barbecue rub, although, idea moment, maybe I should build one of those. But the association still comes because they associate the rub with barbecue, with me. And so I'm getting the benefit of it. Just like if I were to choose a product that was in the color of orange. Orange is a color that is heavily associated with my brand. So always be thinking about brand alignment as well. Whether you are sending a stress ball, socks, Uncle Roy, whether you're sending a phone charger, each of these items, or whatever item it is ultimately that you choose, not only serves a practical purpose, but it also puts your name and brand front and center in the daily lives of the recipients. That's the goal. This is a form of follow-up. It's a form of making sure that they never forget about you. So choosing something that is useful or something that is unique, something that makes you stand out from the crowd, it leaves a lasting impression. That's how you're always going to stay top of mind. So hopefully some of these tips help you in trying to choose whatever it is that you are going to use for the next piece of branded swag that becomes part of your overall voiceover marketing strategy. I would love to know, what is the most effective piece of swag that you have either received or that you have given? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Maybe it'll spark some ideas for everybody who's watching.